Test, there it is. See, we got to have Mac back there, and everything works. A couple things I wanted to bring up. A lot going on in the world, and with that massacre in Australia, and we know that was all, ISIS and just the Muslim ideology. And then I was listening to a guy on YouTube, but if he didn't know that Brown University attack, the class that was actually being taught was a class on Israel. So, that wasn't just a random go into a class and shoot. It was, I believe, inspired another attack against the Jewish people. And then I just read this one this morning. New York City police hunt suspect accused of stabbing Jewish man in the chest and yelling anti-Semitic remarks as he did. And so the enemy's just really stepped it up, and we got to be in prayer for the Jewish people, and we need to let them know that we stand with them too. So keep them in prayer. I'd read another thing I thought this was funny. So this is in New York, but a student government approved safe space for furries as trend grows on campus. You guys know what a furry is? So it's when somebody wants to identify as an animal and they dress up as that animal, and they are furry. And it was interesting. Last night I was talking to Bill and Tina, and Bill used to teach at a high school down there in Phoenix, and there was this student that identified as a cat or something, I don't know. But the mom came down to the school and demanded that they put a kitty litter box in the bathroom for her child. I will say they didn't do it, so we haven't gone that far, I guess. But just the fact that these things are going on in our country, and it's insane. And I've always said, if you can teach a generation and a generation believes that they evolved from apes and there's no consequences for their sins, I mean, it's what else, yeah, they're going to believe they're a cat. Yeah, they're going to believe they can change their gender. Yeah, they're going to believe that men can have babies. I mean, there's no end to it. And then there was another article I read, and I just saw this one. It was in Ireland. But in Ireland, a pastor was praying and preaching John 3:16 in front of an abortion clinic, and he's been arrested and detained, and they haven't let him out yet. So, it's just crazy times. But we continue to stand for the truth. I always say things change, but our marching orders do not change. We continue to share the gospel, preach the truth, and stand in the truth, and we continue to love, right? Amen. All right, well, no further ado. We got our brother Dave's going to give us the word, I think, in Genesis. So he's just going to we'll just continue to go verse by verse. Thank you, brother.
Am I on? Okay. Well, hello. I'm kind of new here, so I want to introduce myself. I'm David Shepard, and my better half down there is Patty. So howdy to you all. we're really enjoying this church and loving everybody. We just feel like God directed us here. So very happy about being here. And this is quite a chapter, this chapter 16. So we will get into it. And like what it says up there, the big picture here, I want you to remember, the promises of the Bible to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Those were the promises are to. And so I'll start right off here with 16, 1 and 2. Now, I'm going to change the names here. Sarai and Abram, I'm just going to call them Abraham and Sarah. So much easier because I have a hard time saying those words over and over again. So, so Sarah, Abraham's wife, bare him no children, and she had a handmaid in an Egyptian whose name was Hagar. And Sarah said unto Abraham, Behold, now Jehovah hath restrained me from bearing. Go in, I pray thee, unto my handmaid. It may be that I shall obtain children by her. And Abraham hearkened to the voice of Sarah. You know, now I know why the pastor handed this chapter off to me. But fortunately, I was in construction and I was a plumber, so I'm used to being in the dirt. So I'm very happy because the more I got read into this chapter, the more things I saw. And so what we have here is kind of a whoa-nelly moment here with what is said here. Because we've just been through chapter 12. Chapter 12 is the promises to Abraham for the coming Messiah and other things. And chapter 15 is the covenant he made to Abraham. I mean, it's just all good stuff, and then we go right into the dumpster here on this. So that's kind of the way I look. But then I saw also, too, we see God's ways are so far above man's ways in this. So it is an interesting chapter. So to start off with, is Sarah out of her cotton-picking mind here? Well, we have to go back a few thousand years to see what's going on. If you go to Genesis 11:30, you see back in the 11th chapter here, and Sarah was barren; she had no child. So Sarah has been barren, and she knows that. So that's in her mind. And in Genesis chapter 15, God promised Abraham a child. Now this is kind of interesting. If you read that, he promised Abraham that the child will come through Abraham. For some reason, it's not mentioned that child would come through Sarah. But it's just logical. That's his wife. That would be the way you think. But it's not really stated there in chapter 15 that the child would come through Sarah. And so that's just something to keep in mind. And another thing too, Hagar comes up here. Now Hagar, her name means to be a fugitive, to flee, or flight. Hagar, the handmaid, came back with Abraham and Sarah from Egypt. And one rabbinic tradition has it that this was Pharaoh's daughter. I don't know if it's the truth or not, but I just in my reading and studying, I thought that it's a rabbinic tradition that this gal was Pharaoh's daughter. And so since Sarah knew she was barren, her offer to the handmaid Hagar was in keeping with the codes of that day. Now, the codes of that day, there was the code of Hammurabi, and there was also the Nutsi tablets, and I read there was a couple of, and the codes all kind of went down the same track. This was the laws of the land during those days. They taught that if you were barren, to get a handmaid and to have a baby through that handmaid with your husband, and then that you would raise the baby as your own. The mistress would be responsible, and then you could take that name and carry your name on. And so that was the back of her mind. That's the reason why, she did that. And another Jewish commentator that I read after and this was kind of a common thought too, is that if you were barren for 10 years back in those days, the man should get a divorce and marry somebody else, which is, again, that's from a rabbi, but I thought it was kind of interesting that was the way things were looked at back then. So, so verse 2 here, we have Abraham hearkening to the voice of Sarah. And let's look at Deuteronomy 4:1 to get a picture of exactly what hearkening is. Want to understand this. Deuteronomy 4:1 says, "And now, O Israel, hearken unto the statutes and unto the ordinances which I teach you to do them, that ye may live and go in and possess the land which Jehovah, the God of your fathers, giveth you." So hearken simply means obey. So we got Abraham hearkening, obeying his wife. Well, go in 16:2. Now go to Genesis 3:17. In Genesis 3:17, "And unto Adam he said, Because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten of the tree which I commanded thee, saying, Thou shalt not eat of it, cursed is the ground." Well, I don't have to go, but you, that same thing's going on here. We got both these guys that are hearkening to the voice of their wives, correct? Well, this shows that this is Genesis. We got these two people, two guys right out of the gate here that are hearkening up the wrong tree, and so it's just not good at all. And so as we go on, we'll see more about this word hearken come up. And by the way, if your Bible says heeded, that's okay, but it's not. It doesn't fit real. You can be hearkening up the wrong tree, but you can't be heeded up the wrong tree. So I like the word hearkening better. In fact, I think the more I looked at this today with that hearkening coming up, I thought, that's a word I'm going to start. Yeah, I like that word. That had a kind of an appeal to me. And so let's go to 16:3. 16:3 says, "And Sarah, Abraham's wife, took Hagar, the Egyptian, her handmaid, after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan, and gave her to Abraham, her husband, to be his wife." So here we go. That after 10 years here, and that would be chapter 12 to 16 that we're looking at here. There's a lapse of faith here we see going on. So Abraham's 85, Sarah's 75. So Sarah gave Hagar to be her husband. He gave her husband to say Hagar. And so back then, this was considered a legal marriage. This was okay at that time. But here's the problem. This is not God's will. The same thing that's going on here went on. This is a replay of the Garden of Eden. This is not God's will. So substituting your will for the will of God, that's the essence of sin. You do that. When I was a young man, we went to a church where the pastor had God's will. He had a little thing over his door. God's will. Nothing more, nothing less, nothing else. That should be what we point to. That's the goal. That's the right idea there. So we'll go on here to Genesis 16, 4 and 5. Now, and he went into Hagar, and she conceived, and when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despised in her eyes. And Sarah said to Abraham, "My wrong be upon thee. I gave my handmaid unto thy bosom, and when she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her eyes. Jehovah judge between me and thee. Well, this is what they call, now this would be the biblical scholars. This is called a na-na-na-na-na moment. Now, what I mean by a na-na-na-na-na moment, here we got Hagar, and she's pregnant, and she goes up to Sarah and says, I have a baby and you can't. Na, 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 na. Or it could be, na, 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 I'm having a baby and you can't. So you could see how this turns into a real problem. I mean, this is not the way you approach. You know that book, Norman Vincent's Peale, How to Win Friends and Influence People? That wasn't out yet. And so in fact, I don't think Sarah would have given that to Hagar. I think she was pretty furious. And then we'll see that and I don't blame her. And back then, you have to understand too, you were despised if you were a barren woman. There was this was kind of a common problem, to be despised if you were barren, and this wasn't a smart thing for Hagar to do. So, so let's go to verse 5. And Sarah said unto Abraham, my wrong be we read that already. I just didn't see. Well, be upon thee. Verse 5 says, my wrong be upon thee. In English, that is, you big lug, it's all your fault. That's what she's saying here. He's totally responsible for this. And you know something? As we get into this a little bit more, I'm on her side on this. And so Sarah said that, this is kind of a teaching point I thought I might use. And this is a tongue in the cheek moment I'm going to share with you, but I'm going to make sense out of it a little later on. Right now, when you get married, if a guy gets married, you know what you got to realize? Your wife is always right. You ever heard happy wife, happy life? You say, well, that's not in the Bible. Yes, it is. Happy wife, happy life. You need to go to 1 Peter 3:7. Ye husbands, in like manner, dwell with your wives according to knowledge, giving honor unto the woman as unto the weaker vessel, as being also joint heirs of the grace of life, to the end that your prayers be not hindered. You know what this is saying? If you want to fight with your wife, go ahead there, but Jesus has a giant incinerator up there in heaven. And your prayers go right into that, and they go right out into the septic tank. And so, if that's what you want, that's what. But that's how important it is to get along and have a good relationship with your wife. Now, let me give you a quick thing. If J. Vernon McGee were still alive, he says, you go over there yonder to Prescott Valley, and you go over there and get in, and go get into Hobby Lobby. And I'm saying it's good for many. You should hightail it on over to Hobby Lobby. If you don't know, you never heard of it, or you don't know where it is, your wife does. And so you go over there, and they got these little magnetic things you put on the refrigerator, and get the ones that says, yes, dear. And you bring that on home, you hightail it back on home, you put that on the refrigerator right at eye level, that's a life changer. Now, I'm going to get back into this. I'll prove it later on. Now, so we're going to go to 16:6 right now. 16:6 says, but Abraham said unto Sarah, behold, thy maid is in thy hand, do to that which is good in thine eyes. And Sarah dealt hardly with her, and she fled from her face. So here we go. Here's where Hagar's attitude here and what she was doing was really foolish, because she was still Sarah's possession. And she even though Sarah gave the okay for the marriage, she could put her right back in a slave condition. So that's kind of what's happening here. And so those two get into a big cat fight, and Hagar goes down the road. In fact, it would have been, I kind of thought as I was reading this, it would have been great to be there. I would have been a fly on the wall. I would have liked to hear that conversation between those two, because that had to be a keeper. But of course, God didn't share that with us. Maybe he couldn't because of what went on. But anyway, and so the next verse here, verse 7, says, "And the angel of Jehovah found her by a fountain of water in the wilderness, by the fountain in the way to Shur, on the way to Egypt." Now, this is the first time the angel of Jehovah is mentioned. This is real important. If you see the angel of Jehovah in the Hebrew Bible in the Old Testament, you will see in the same context if it's God. When you see God, and you can interchange it in the context, this angel of Jehovah is Jesus in his prenatal state. And let me just prove that. Go to Exodus 14:19. Exodus 14:19 says, "And the angel of God who went before the camp of Israel removed and went behind them, and the pillar of the cloud removed from before them and stood behind them." Now go to Exodus 23:20 and 21. And these are good ones. These verses are good to underline. These are so important. And so Exodus 23:20 says, "Behold, I send an angel before thee to keep thee by the way." So saying the same thing the other reference did. "And to bring thee into the place which I have prepared. Take ye heed before him." Here we go. "And hearken," obey. Here we got the hearken again. Obey unto his voice. "Provoke him not, for he will not pardon your transgressions, for my name is in him." The only one that can pardon transgressions is God. No created being can do that. So this is where you see the equality with God right here. He says, "This one, he will not pardon your transgressions." So this is Jesus he's talking about. This is the Father and the Son going back and forth here. And for him to say his name is in him, name carries character, the idea of character. So this is the same character as God the Father. In other words, they're the same character. They're equal. And so, and another, once I didn't give this, but I thought, let's go to Deuteronomy 18 and 19. Because this is another good one that I just happened to think of as I was. Because I like the Hebrew Bible when it's talking about the Messiah. In Deuteronomy 18:18, "I will raise them up a prophet from among my brethren like unto thee." This is Moses, like unto Moses. "And I will put my words in his mouth. He shall speak unto them all that I shall command him." And then listen to this. "And it shall come to pass that whosoever shall not hearken," believe, "unto the words which he shall speak in my name, God the Father, I will require it of him." And so that is Moses talking about the future prophet coming, Jesus. So those are just, to me, those are such key things to understand, because I was with a pastor once, and he was teaching another pastor, and he was trying to teach him what I'm just talking about right now, and the guy wouldn't listen. He said there's no way that the angel of the Lord was Jesus in the Old Testament. And so I was kind of blown away with that one, but that was in the past. So let's look at Genesis 16:8 and 9. "And he said, Hagar, Sarah's handmaid, whence comest thou, and whither goest thou? And she said, I am fleeing from the face of my mistress Sarah. And the angel of Jehovah said unto her, Return to thy mistress, and submit thyself under her hands. So we got God telling Hagar to submit to Sarah, to get over the na-na-na-nasa, get over that attitude stuff. We don't need that, to lighten up. And it says here that on H that she was on her way to Shur, and that's probably on the road to Egypt. So he's giving her instructions of what she needs to do. So if we go to 16, 10, and 11, and the angel of Jehovah said unto her, I will greatly multiply thy seed, and it shall not be numbered for multitude. And the angel of Jehovah said unto her, Behold, thou art with child, and shalt bear a son, and shall call his name Ishmael, because Jehovah hath heard thy affliction. So the promise to her is the only promise in the Bible to a woman this way. She got the only promise for her seed to be the only woman in the Bible that had that promise. So that was God's. We're seeing God intervene in the behalf of Hagar, who has not had much to say about any. I mean, she was just taken, and she's basically a slave. And here Jesus steps in. We're seeing grace here, and he said that her seed would be greatly multiplied. When you seed things like the sand of the sea, you're going to be, or you're going to be like the stars. That's hyperbole. But it's saying there's going to be a lot of folks come from that. The reason why I like to say some things, I take the Bible at face value. I learned when I was a young guy the face value of the Word of God. And so I do that as much, but I believe that God says what he means and means what he says. So I look at everything that way, that it can be taken that way. So, and here we go. He said that her unborn child should be named Ishmael. That was the first time that God has done that, to give the name of a child before they're born. So she had that privilege. And God said he heard her affliction. So this is the heart of God we're seeing here, to go for the downtrodden. We saw that throughout the whole New Testament when Jesus came. So that's what I see here, going on. But we get to 16:12. Listen to this one. It's just like, wowee. And so and then Jesus is saying to him, and he shall be as a wild ass among men. His hand shall be against every man, and every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell over against all his brethren. So let me just kind of unpack that a little bit. When it talks about being a wild ass, it means he's a roamer, a nomad. That was going to be kind of the trait of this group. And here's the really bad. And his hand shall be against every man. You know what that is? That's terrorist. That's the definition of a terrorist right there. And his hand shall be against every man. That's the attitude of a terrorist. And then it goes on to say, and every man's hand against him. You're going to have to defend yourself from this guy. So that shows there's going to be retaliation for what this group is going to do. And then thirdly, and he shall dwell over against all his brethren. Now, his brother would be Isaac, his brother. They're going to live side by side, but it's going to be a hostile environment because he's making things hostile. And so, you know what I thought when I read this? Did Hagar say, would you mind repeating that? This is going to be my son? That's not a glowing, I mean, I was thinking from her standpoint, man, this isn't good. I was thinking maybe she would you repeat that, Jesus? You know, but that's what it is. So we see the October 7th, 2023. That's what we're seeing. This is just carried on and carried on and carried on. This has been going on since he was born. So this is an ongoing thing throughout the whole Bible. And so I just kind of wrote down some notes here to summarize. I wanted to get back to obeying, the hearkening and things, and the idea that you should have the yes dear on your refrigerator. This is important. Back to Abraham hearkening to his wife. I said, Abraham was told he would have a son. Naturally, that would come through Sarah. That would be the natural way we think this is going to happen, right? And I'm going to say God's ways are unchangeable. It says so in Hebrews 13:8. It was 24 years after the promise, which shows that they needed to wait on the Lord. It was 24 years after the promise. He had this baby with a handmaid, Hagar, at 10 years. It was another 14 years before Sarah had the baby. So I'm saying that was a long time. And what does that show? It shows that we need to be patient. He's going to honor every promise he ever made. But we can't jump up and down and be totally impatient. And the pastor's mentioned patience. I've heard people pray for patience, and I always pray for mercy on them, because you don't. If you pray for patience, it's like you're 6 ways to nowhere. You can't. God will put you in a position where you can't go forward, you can't go back, you can't go left or right or up or down. So I'm just saying, I love the idea of. And I admire people that have patience, but I'm not saying for you guys don't necessarily pray for patience. Abraham listened to his wife. He had this child, Ishmael. His lack of faith resulted in a blood feud that has lasted almost 4,000 years. Sarah recognized her sin in verse 5. Now listen, my wrong be upon thee. But she says, my wrong be upon you. She just switched it. She realized she'd sinned. If Abraham was the spiritual leader of the house, he would have helped Sarah and himself to trust God rather than follow the tradition of the laws of that time to have a baby through Hagar. In this sense, Abraham was responsible for the mess this created. He's the leader. Abraham should have been the leader. He was not the leader. So I'm saying keep that yes dear on the refrigerator. Okay, men need to lead their families by prayer for daily Holy Spirit guidance and light on everything we do. That's the key to walking with God. And if you do that, your wife will go on down to Hobby Lobby, and she knows the way, and she'll get a second little thing that says, yes, dear. And that's the happy marriage right there. That's what my point, the happy wife, happy life. And that was the point I was getting at. Now, to bring this into reality a little bit with my wife and I, Patty said, we have this poodle, a standard poodle. We both love this poodle to death. But Patty said if we ever get divorced, she gets the poodle. And I got a 1989 Sidekick Suzuki that needs a flywheel and a clutch and a pressure plate and synchros in the transmission, because I taught my grandkids how to drive a stick shift. And you said, that's all I get, and you're out the door. So I just want to that's the practical end of this. But anyway, I just wanted to share that, because things are what they are. So, so 16:13 goes to, and she called the name of Jehovah that spake unto her, thou art a God that seeth, for she said, have I ever looked after him that seeth me? This is very interesting. she called on the name of God. So she's beginning to see the character of this God. Why? The Egyptians had such a primitive idea, they didn't realize that God could see them. And she's recognized, God, you're seeing me. You're seeing me. So that was a whole new thing for her to grasp. And so what I want to do is I want to share with you some verses, and I believe these verses are the second most important verses in the Bible for you to understand, and that's Exodus 34, 6 and 7. Like I said, the second three verses that I think are so important to understand. Exodus 34, 5 says, "And Jehovah descended in a cloud and stood before him," Moses there, "and proclaimed the name of Jehovah." This is the character of God. What I like, these two verses, I can't find in the Bible any two verses that explain the God we're worshiping any better than these two verses. "And Jehovah passed by before him," Moses, "and proclaimed, Jehovah, Jehovah, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, abundant in loving kindness and truth, keeping loving kindness for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, and that will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, upon the third and fourth generation." Those verses are just so good. Those should be underlined. So if somebody tells you who you worship, what's the God of the Bible, those two verses explain that's the God. What's that? Okay. I just wanted to put, because I feel that's so important. Now, going back to the 16th chapter, the 14th verse, I don't have to read that. They were at a well, and the well is the well of the living one who seeth me. So that's what the name of that well. What's interesting about this is that later this became the home of Isaac. And it says that in Genesis 24:62. So I thought that was very interesting than that. And verse 16:15 says, "And Hagar bare Abraham a son, and Abraham called the name of the son whom Hagar bare Ishmael." Now, Hagar must have told Abraham that the Lord says to name the kid Ishmael, because that's the way he would know that. So when Hagar had the baby, her little terrorist baby, he named it Ishmael. So 16:16 says, "And Abraham was 86 years old when Hagar bare Ishmael to Abraham." So he was 86 years old, and like I said, there's another 14 years, so he'd be 99 years old before he has Isaac. And so that's kind of what the story's about. But I thought in between things, there's a lot, and God's grace and his ways above our ways, and stepping in and doing what he does is just so amazing. Now, Galatians 4:21 through 31, Ishmael is pictured as the son of the bondwoman, and Isaac is pictured as the son of the free woman. Maybe I'll just let's go to Galatians and read that. Galatians 4:21 through 31. "Tell me, ye that desire to be under the law, do you not hear the law? For it is written that Abraham had two sons, one by the handmaid and one by the free woman. Howbeit, the son of the handmaid is born after the flesh." You see, in other words, that was being born after the flesh here. And what he said, that was the will that Abraham and Sarah had. But the son by the free woman is born through the promise. There's the promise in 15 to have this son. So, which things contain an allegory? For these women are two covenants, one from Mount Sinai, like legalism, bearing children, unto bondage, which is Hagar. And now this Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia, and answereth to the Jerusalem that now is. For she is in bondage with her children. But the Jerusalem that is above is free, which is our mother. For it is written, Rejoice, thou barren that bearest not. Break forth and cry, thou that travailest not. For more are the children of the desolate than of her that hath the husband. Now we, brethren, as Isaac was, are children of the promise. But as then he that was born after the flesh persecuted him, that was born after the Spirit, so also it is now. And that now was then and now. Howbeit, what saith the Scripture? Cast out the handmaid and her son, for the son of the handmaid shall not inherit with the son of the free woman. Wherefore, brethren, we are not children of the handmaid, but of the free woman. So that's what I have on that, and I really enjoyed studying this, and I hope I made some good points. Thank you.
Dave, that was good. Hope you guys got fed. I did. Took a lot of notes too. We're going to go ahead and close in prayer. We're just going to, Mac, we can just go ahead and go off air if you want, and then we'll go to Lord in prayer. If you feel led to pray, just go ahead and pray, and then I'll close this out. So.